Hey everyone, Leo is here with David from Celebal Tech. They're doing a lot of good things with IoT operations. Stay tuned. Hey everyone, Leo is here, and I have David here with me from Celebal Tech. Another Jumpstart Lightning episode. This is part of the series with all the partners, the great partners that we have here in Microsoft around Azure IoT Operations. David, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm very well, Leo. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I hope you're okay there and in the land down under. David, before we go and nerd out on all the good things you guys are doing, who you are, what is it that you do?
So, my name's David Gooding. I work for a company called Celebal Tech. I lead their operations technology and energy practices globally. I come from the operations world and the world where we want to liberate what we're doing and make and generate a lot of insights out of that.
Definitely we're going to have a fun conversation from someone that is coming from the from the infrastructure and development world, talking to someone that is heavily invested in the operational world. And I think that this is, David, it's a good segue for the conversation. This is part of a, kind of a series that we do with our partners. And when I saw some of the early materials that you guys are coming up with, I was really excited to talk to you. So let's dive right in. David, like what are the things that you're seeing right now? What is it that you guys are doing? What are the changes in industry that we're looking at these days?
I think a lot of the changes we see in industry come back to the need to go faster, the need to be more agile, the need to be more
Mm,
adaptive. And we've said these words for many years. But for some reason, my experience and experience with my colleagues, it has always been that we get stuck halfway through, we get stuck early in the stages. And it's
mm,
always that I need the data. I need to see that data. I need to get access to that data. And the challenge is I'll be very honest. The infrastructure world and in operations, there's a lot of old systems. I have
yeah.
clients and customers and sites I work on that are 20 years old. And for those that really want to nerd out, have things like DCOM still running in there and
Mhm.
RS-232. This is normal for me. But the challenge is
Yeah.
it's not all shiny. But how do we deal with that? And that's one of the biggest challenges. So when we get to doing the cool stuff, when we actually get to interacting with it, using things like generative AI, using AI in general,
Mhm.
well, we sort of spent all of our money getting the data out. We haven't got any value from that, or as much as we'd like. But we really want to do something more.
Yeah. And I gotta share with you, you're talking about the legacy stuff. So I have, a couple of things here. One, it's not just about the fact that, we're getting stuck. We're also falling into old habits, which is also a bit of a problem in there. And as you were
Mm.
talking about legacy stuff, a while back I started this fun kind of LinkedIn series, Blast from the Past, Nostalgia Friday. And I keep coming up with some old stuff that I used to use as as a PC nerd, and just kind of and when you're talking to me about all these legacy stuff, I can definitely relate, but it's kind of interesting to see how that leads into kind of grown up world when it comes to infrastructure and when it comes to IT and OT. So I can definitely relate to these changes that you are describing. So how do you guys in Celbatech are dealing with these changes?
So for us, the we embarked on I suppose, trying to shift the paradigm rather than focus on just do data engineering, integrate data, and then let's plug use case in. It was get the data integration to a point where it's not just streaming out tags with some values. There's a lot of metadata, there's a lot of contextual information. I need that to make use to make data-driven applications, to
Hmm.
build my digital twin. Well, if I have to manually build that, and it's not saying everything in the OT world is perfect, the reality is it won't be. But if I can get myself 90% of the way there, I am 90% further along than doing it manually. So what we've done
That's
is
fair.
we've been working very closely with the team there to do that and do that in a way that's, and I'll use a word that's not typically heard in the IT world, safe, because older systems are prone to crashing, overloading, and everything else. We need to make sure that whatever we do does has no impact on the operation, both in when we plug it in, but also during long-term operation.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. So how did you guys approach this from an implementation standpoint?
I think every engineer who ever watches this will laugh at my answer here is the KISS principle, where we just keep it simple. What are we trying to do? Let's not overcomplicate things. And then when we are doing that, and when we're approaching this, we're looking going, well, if we're keeping it simple, this is what we really need. When you Do we want to rewrite services that exist? And this is where working with Azure IoT Operations. That provides a fantastic framework for funneling, edge analytics, a whole host of things. Now, do we want to recreate that? No. We just want to plug in and start enabling data into that framework where it can go, be routed, piped, where you need it, used how you want it to be. And then rather than spending all of that time plugging it in, you want that process to be seamless. And that was, I suppose, our guiding premise or our guiding thought coming into this. And that's what we set out to deliver and what we eventually delivered.
Hmm. Yeah. So I know that you guys are doing some interesting things out there. I would love to for you to show me kind of what you guys been cooking.
Oh, definitely. Look, at this point, I think one of the key things was I like to step back just a tiny bit and look at, well, the why, because we keep saying operations will drive efficiency, it will do this. Why and how? Well, when we look at this, I need to drive the best possible outcome for my operations. I need to make sure I codify the knowledge and how the process and how the equipment has run over the time, so that my new workforce, which will be younger, more digitally enabled, but also less practically experienced, how they can use that. And I suppose that's where we started from. And one of the biggest challenges for me was the traditional approach that we had to take. When I look at the traditional approach in integration, and I think you've probably seen this, Leo, over the years,
Hmm.
you integrate to a time series historian. Well, I have a pipeline to get real time data that has
Yeah.
to batch. I have to have a pipeline that deals with outages. I have to have a pipeline that resynchronizes data that from the metadata table, so tags. I have to have a pipeline, and you can see this list of pipelines growing and keeps growing. And then you
Yeah.
toss in the reality, network outages, late arriving data, out of sequence, all these different things. Like you get to the end of it and you go, what did I do? And in the perfect world, it works. Unfortunately, the perfect world is somewhere I think we are all looking for in that space. Will have issues. So the traditional approach, we had this massive overhead. And when we look at it pictographically or in a diagram,
Hmm.
this is a very simple one for me. One line from each system. I have systems that have 20 to 30 pipelines that are very complex, and someone has
Yeah.
to maintain that.
I think that this notion of aggregated data layer is something that has always been out there. The problem is that with these aggregated data layers, that at a certain point, and this is what you see a lot of people struggling with, is that you're giving up. You're giving up on the quality of how you're actually doing data aggregation, which leads to this sprawl of pipelines, sprawl of and different types of data. Like it's not just time series data, like because time series data is also it's just one type of data. Like these time series transaction data, there's also the more kind of classic data pipelines, which is relational database, which is also kind of in the peripheral of these type of solutions. So I find it very, very interesting. So as we are talking about this, David, like what is your approach on solving for this?
So to solve for this, I look at a couple of the challenges we face, and you listed a load of them off. The ones for me,
Hmm.
though, are the large data sets. So when we look at large, what is large? Transactions. Typically, it's the volume and just the sheer number of tags and the limits on the systems.
Hmm.
And those, we want to get that data out, sometimes 10 years, 15 years of data. So the question really is, how do we do that in a system that has limited scalability? We cannot impact the performance of. We want to stream data in parallel, and we will have to deal on top of that with over time, people create tags, delete tags, modify tags, all these different changes. And if we look at some of those, I have a number of clients where they have sensitive information, IP addresses even, ports and IP
Hmm.
addresses. In one place I saw a password in the tag description. We need to make sure that doesn't go in the cloud, because yes, we have layers of security, but we definitely want to make sure that that does not go anywhere,
Right.
and because it has such an impact. So this is where we start. And when I suppose I take past this key challenges, we
Yeah.
want to look at simplifying this. And this is where we came in. And I love the diagram. People go, it's very simplistic. It is. But if we look at the simplification of having just one arrow that
Hmm.
handles that and deals with the safety. So is the source system overloaded? Do I need to stop a backfill? Do I need to make sure that my data is actually running? Do I need to, can I monitor the CPU, the clock cycle, the cycle time? Can I monitor memory? When it's exceeding boundaries, stop my heavy loading operations. May not be me that's causing it, But at the end of the day, the site, the systems, even historians can become quite critical. And this is where, for me, that arrow, that simplification, that's a huge step in the journey for me in
Right.
terms of doing this. And then being able to deploy that in hours to days rather than weeks to months.
Yeah. And I know that you have a cool demo to show me, but before you go into the demo, one of the things that and I got to share with you, the other day I was reading an article around MQ security, just MQTT security, and there was a debate going on around like whether how you should actually, the question is not if whether you should secure your data pipeline. It's more on like how do you go about this, and one of the things that were brought up is the classic notion of a man in the middle, when it comes to MQ security. And I think that in the past, when you're talking about the past versus the future and where we're going with this, I think that in the past there was obviously security, as as life goes on, security is obviously taking much more of a bigger role in our life. But I think that in the past there was not really this strong orientation towards security to that extent, because there was no notion of really pushing the data to the cloud, right? And we're
Mm,
talking about 20 years back, because or 20, 25 years back, when the cloud was not really a thing. But as more data is growing, and as a universe, as a society, we generate more data. It's just a reality of things. Obviously everything is smart, everything needs to be connected, everything needs to be plugged in at all time. So that creates a lot of challenges, and I think that the security portion of it is just extremely critical, something that I'm feel very passionate about, because I think that it's one of those areas that still didn't went through this transformation to, okay, how do we think about OT in the context of the cloud? And I think that this is part of what people are talking about when they're saying IT to OT convergence, which is has its own set of challenges when it comes to how you speak about it. But yeah.
oh, look, well, I'm very passionate as well because many protocols that we still use today are not secure. The security is through the
Right.
obscurity of not knowing the device name and the PLC register ID.
Yeah.
And if I know that, I can write to it. And if I can write to it, I can control something. And
Yeah.
protocols are evolving, but we can't just rip out a plant. And there's also all that
Right.
metadata that comes with that because there's no context at that point. But as you mentioned, there's other systems, so recipe, batching, MES, materials, all this other contextual data that's
Right.
also locked in there. We want to start bringing that together. And for me, it's if you can simplify that down, if you can make it so that I can not only get the current, but the historical, suddenly I've unlocked. And it's a great thing for a client when you can say, it's not a one off data migration project because they're not quite sure how far they want to go.
Right.
Here, it's a case of I can request. And for me, that data model, that allows me to spend time doing the cool stuff, which is doing analysis, visualization, generating fundamentally insights and actions out of that. Because if I'm not doing that, the system's going to have limited use cases in a business.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay, so I think that's a good segue, David, to to your demo. Show me the magic here.
All right, absolutely. So demos, I love demos. I'll explain what we've got sitting under the hood here. We've actually got 5 different facilities that are
Hmm.
different locations. So these are simulated, but this is actually real historians, real building systems, real control systems with real constraints. One of them is sitting on my desk. It is about 15 years old, Leo. You'll laugh, it is still RS-485. Just to give you an idea of context, this is how we test. We don't just build set demos. Now, if I have to go through and control, and I'm just going to show you the actual the home screen. Now, I know
Hmm.
you're going to Tokyo, and I love Tokyo, by the way. It's one of my favorite cities to visit. The food is amazing. People are absolutely, the people are fantastic. The experience there. But one of the interesting things is when you're doing this, and many operations are global in size that we work with. They have facilities in Japan, in Australia, New Zealand, in the Middle East, in Europe. Now, if I go through the traditional data integration approach
Hmm.
across even 7 sites, to build a dashboard like this, and I've got all of these sites, including where my home is. Now, this would take weeks to set the data integration up, get the pipelines tested, probably months. I'd then have to stream that data in, and then I have to data migrate data, which could take another few months.
Hmm.
Now, with this, what was cool, I started this up yesterday. There are about 15 different servers in this. As I said, it's a real simulation. What's
Hmm.
cool? I've got data coming back from last year still. It's still streaming in. I think my Azure subscription is going to be nice and chunky by the end of this, or at least at a nice size. I pay $1 a month usually, so it's going to be a multiple of $1. Uh, but what's really cool about this is instead of that, and it's early in the morning for me being in Australia for this recording, if I can get up this morning, build an integrated dashboard that has multiple buildings, so I can select a facility. It's got alarms. It's got some real data. I can open that building up. I can see the current value, so total energy consumption. I can see a breakdown of events that's come from their internal management system as well, which is a completely different system. And I can do that across this. Now, I didn't spend weeks integrating the data. I spent
Hmm.
a few hours. I did my cybersecurity, and I'm a big believer. The focus nowadays is around, as you said, cybersecurity. That's threat risk analysis. That's going through understanding my threat vectors. It's understanding the interactions between systems. That's where the time needs to be spent.
Hmm.
Once I've done that, plugging in is very, very simple. Getting data up to the cloud, handling outages, comms outages, all these different factors that influence things. Well, it just allows me to plug and play. It's much more like what I call not even a Lego set. It's like a Duplo set. I plug four blocks together, and my 2-year-old, who has just woken up, he can get going and drive his police bike around the house.
Hmm.
That is where, for me, the simplicity here is so key because building a dashboard, I spent 3 hours doing that rather than 6 hours doing data integration and having nothing to show you this morning, Leo,
Yeah.
which would be very disappointing given you're going to Japan.
Yeah, I'm loving it. So just in the notion of plug and play, just before, and thank you for that. Like I'm also very passionate about like how do we harvest data. So I just want to again in the spirit of plugging here Azure IoT Operations, like where does that fit the bill here in terms of the pipeline, in terms of the solution? How do you guys using it?
So currently, we integrate into Azure IoT Operations from a legacy perspective through MQTT through the MQTT broker. Now, what Azure
Hmm.
IoT Operations gives me is all of that piping. Where do I want to send the data in the cloud? What do I want to do
Yeah.
with it? Do I want to do stuff on
Right.
the edge? In the old
Yeah.
days, I'd have to set my own containers up. So, as a customer, and I have been a customer, I'm tied to a vendor. I'm stuck. If I don't quite like how it's going, it's not open. There's no third party, and I'm very dependent on that. And most vendors are outside of the cloud at that point from an OT perspective. And I love the OT side of the world. Where we come in is, and going forward, we're releasing our version in alignment with the launch of Azure IoT Operations Arcre.
Hmm.
We're actually getting that Arcre integration in there, so you not only have to plug and stream data in, but you can actually discover, which is a lot
Yeah.
simpler. But where Azure IoT Operations fits for me is it does all that pipe work. It gives me that infrastructure, that framework, and it does it in a way that is scalable and open.
Yeah.
So I can scale this out from 500 tags in the POC on a single node to an integrated solution with small language models on the edge, potentially video processing on the edge with time series, and still getting that data in the cloud, but giving that site or operation autonomy. So, in the inevitability, and in Australia, we have large swathes of space where
Hmm.
I'm on satellite uplinks, for example. If I have bad weather, luckily not today, I can have hours of no internet, potentially last year in the cyclone, days. As a site, I
Yeah.
can't do without days of insights. This is for me where we're really unlocking that in Azure IoT Operations. That's the key to this really now at this
Right.
point, because you've made that simple, clean, and I'm not trying to plug it because I actually love Azure IoT Operations. It really makes this a really nice journey. For us, it
Yeah.
was let's not replace it. Let's make sure everything in that world can plug in and enable AI and other insight generating solutions in the cloud. That's it for
Yeah.
me.
Definitely, it kind of serves means to an end. I mean, at the end of the day, IoT operations kind of sits in the middle of the pipeline, especially in the context of data flows and the fact that you can actually design those data flows in the way that you want. And also, obviously, the Acre and the auto discovery. That's a killer feature. That is definitely something for people that are using a lot of things that's got to do with RTSP streams and video and all of that. I think that it's crucial, and I can't wait to see Acre starting to penetrate to more areas, and not just RTSP oriented kind of asset and devices. David, thank you so much for a lovely episode. I always enjoy having this type of nerdy conversations with engineers, and this was definitely one of those. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for coming to the show, and for the Jumpstart Lighting audience, thank you so much for joining us. Make sure to like, subscribe, and we're gonna see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.